Trapped in Boston's blizzard, a terrifying truck driver horror story. Before we dive into tonight's chilling tale, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us keep bringing you terrifying stories every single week. And comment below telling us where you're watching from. You might just find someone listening at the exact same time as you, feeling the exact same chill. My name's Daniel, and I've been a long-haul truck driver for almost 15 years. I've seen my share of late-night roads, empty highways, and strange weather, but nothing, and I mean nothing, ever shook me the way that one delivery through Boston did. I used to laugh when people told ghost stories about the East Coast, old towns filled with Revolutionary War history, graveyards older than most states, and cobblestone streets where the past lingers like smoke. But when you spend enough time driving through New England in the dead of winter, alone in the cab of your truck with nothing but the hum of the engine and your thoughts, you start to understand how thin the line between this world and something else can be. It was a cold January night, well past midnight. I was hauling a load of medical supplies down from Maine, cutting through Boston before heading west. Snow had been falling hard since New Hampshire, the kind of storm that eats the edges of the road and leaves you feeling like you're tunneling through an endless white void. My GPS kept glitching out, flickering in and out like the storm was chewing on the signal. Still, I figured I'd make it through the city, hit the turnpike, and find a rest stop on the outskirts before exhaustion swallowed me whole. The city looked strange that night. Boston is never truly quiet, but as I rolled in on I-93, I noticed something was off. No cars, no plows, no taxis cutting through the snow, just me, my truck, and the storm. Even the skyline seemed muted, as though the snow had buried the lights beneath layers of silence. I slowed as I reached an exit ramp. The GPS insisted this was the faster route, and before long I found myself grinding down narrow old streets lined with brick buildings. The snowplows hadn't touched them. Tire tracks disappeared after only a block, as if I was the first person to drive this way in hours, maybe longer. That's when I saw the first figure. At the corner of Tremont Street, someone stood in the snow, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, maybe a century out of place. A long dark coat, a hat pulled low. At first I thought it was just someone braving the storm, but they didn't move as I passed. They didn't even flinch when my headlights hit them full on. Their face, pale, too pale, like frostbite had eaten it away, turned ever so slightly to follow me. I shivered but kept going. Truckers don't stop for weirdos in storms. That's rule number 1. Still, the streets twisted unnaturally. Boston's always been a maze, but I know my roots, and this wasn't right. Streets appeared where they shouldn't, corners doubling back on themselves, alleys stretching wider than I remembered. The GPS had long since gone dead, the screen frozen on a blinking arrow surrounded by nothing. Then came the whispers. At first I thought it was the CB radio catching interference, a crackle, then a faint voice. But I checked. The CB was off. The sound was coming from somewhere else. It rose and fell with the storm, soft, like dozens of voices whispering beneath the snow. Not words I could understand, but the cadence was wrong, too deliberate, too hungry. I gripped the wheel tighter, sweat running down my back, even though the heater was struggling to keep up. Another figure appeared ahead, standing in the middle of the road this time. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded, fishtailing slightly, but when my headlights caught the figure, my stomach dropped. It was a woman in a long dress, the fabric tattered, soaked in snow. Her hair hung in frozen clumps, and her eyes, God, her eyes, reflected the headlights like an animal's. She raised one hand, slow and stiff, pointing directly at my cab. I blasted the horn. The sound tore through the night, but she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. When the air horn died, silence rushed back in. And then, she was gone. Not like she ran, not like she moved. Just gone. I slammed the truck into gear and pushed forward, tires grinding against the snow-packed street. Every instinct screamed at me to get back to the highway, to find an open road, any road that wasn't this maze of dead streets. But the city wouldn't let me go. Every turn brought me deeper into a Boston I didn't recognize. Old signs, buildings that looked untouched for centuries, doorways bricked up and covered in frost, and the whispers, louder now, like they were pressing in from all sides. I remember passing by a row of brownstones, all dark, all empty, except one. A window glowed faintly orange, like a candle flickering inside. For just a second, I thought I saw dozens of faces pressed to the glass, pale and watching, eyes unblinking. Then the candle guttered out, leaving nothing but darkness. I tried the radio, AM, FM, anything, nothing but static, until a voice, clear, male, cold. "You don't belong here." It came through the speakers with a hiss of static, and then silence again. I nearly drove into a snowbank. My hands were trembling on the wheel. I don't remember how long I drove like that. Minutes, hours, it all bled together. The storm was so heavy I felt like I was trapped in a globe being shaken by something unseen. Streets looped back on themselves. Familiar landmarks twisted into grotesque versions. Churches with leaning steeples, graveyards with headstones that looked freshly dug despite the snow. And then the road ended. Just ended. I rounded a corner, and instead of a street stretching ahead, there was only a wall of snow, piled high as a building. My headlights hit it, throwing long shadows across the ice, and in those shadows, figures moved, dozens of them, men, women, children. Their clothes were from every era, some in colonial garb, some in tattered rags, some dressed like they'd just walked out of the 1970s. All pale, all watching. Their lips moved in unison, whispering words I couldn't hear, couldn't understand. I tried to reverse, but the truck wouldn't budge. The wheels spun uselessly. The cab grew colder. Frost crept across the inside of the windshield, delicate patterns spiderwebbing across the glass. My breath fogged in front of me, too thick, too heavy. And then, one of them was inside. A man in the passenger seat. No sound, no warning. Just there. His eyes were pits of ice, his skin gray-blue. He leaned toward me, mouth opening far too wide, wider than any human mouth should, and from it poured the same whispering voices I'd heard in the snow. I screamed and slammed my fist into the gear shift. Somehow, someway, the truck lurched backward, wheels catching traction. I floored it, not caring where I was going, just away, away, away. The man vanished. The whispers faded. I don't remember how I found the highway again. One moment I was lost in that endless maze. The next I was merging back onto I-90, the snowstorm still raging, but the city behind me, silent and dark. By the time I pulled into a rest stop outside Worcester, the sun was starting to rise. My hands were still shaking as I killed the engine. I sat there in silence, watching the snow ease up, wondering if I'd imagined it all. But when I glanced at the passenger seat, frost still clung to the upholstery in the shape of a handprint. I haven't taken a load through Boston at night since, and I never will again. The last delivery into Chicago, a truck driver's nightmare. My name's Robert, and I've been behind the wheel of 18-wheelers for more than 2 decades. I've hauled through every state, from the quiet pine forests of Oregon to the endless desert highways of Nevada. But nothing has ever haunted me like one delivery I made through Chicago a few winters back. Truckers swap stories at diners and rest stops. You hear about haunted highways, phantom hitchhikers, or strange lights in the sky. Most of us laugh it off, but there's a reason a lot of long haulers avoid Chicago at night, and I learned it the hard way. It was late February, one of those nights where the wind cuts through steel and the lake freezes like glass. I was hauling electronics, supposed to cut through Chicago before heading north. Snow was falling thick, but that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how empty the city seemed. Anyone who's been through Chicago knows the traffic doesn't sleep. Even at 3 in the morning, you'll see cabs, buses, late-night wanderers. But as I crossed into the city limits, past the glow of the skyline, the streets were still, dead quiet. At first, I thought it was the storm. Maybe everyone was smart enough to stay inside, but as my rig rolled down the Kennedy Expressway, I couldn't shake the feeling that the city was holding its breath. The first sign something was wrong came near an underpass. My headlights picked up graffiti sprayed across the concrete. Nothing new in Chicago, but this was different. The words stretched the full length of the wall, scrawled in jagged black letters, "They don't belong to us." I frowned, leaning forward to get a better look, but the snow swallowed it up as I passed. A mile later, my CB crackled to life, even though I hadn't touched it all night. "Driver, you hear him yet?" The voice was male, low, like gravel dragged across concrete. I grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" Static. Then a laugh. Wet. Broken. I switched the CB off, some idiot messing around, but my knuckles were white on the wheel. Downtown loomed, towers like jagged teeth in the snowstorm. I eased off the highway, cutting through side streets to follow the GPS. That's when I saw the first figure. At the corner of a deserted intersection, someone stood in the snow. A man in an old fedora, trench coat flapping in the wind. Chicago had its share of old ghosts, prohibition stories, mobsters buried in the river. But this man didn't look real. His face was too pale, too sharp, eyes black as the lake at midnight. I slowed, heart hammering. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched as my truck crawled past. A block later, another figure, this time a woman. Dress from the 1940s, hair curled, skin gray as ash. She stood beneath a broken streetlight, staring upward at nothing. Then another, and another. Every street, every corner. Dozens of them, silent, frozen, staring. I tried the radio, static. Tried my phone, dead. The city wasn't empty. It was full, but not with the living. I pressed harder on the accelerator, desperate to get through. But Chicago's streets are a maze. One wrong turn and you're swallowed whole. The GPS flickered, then died. I was on my own. The snow thickened until it was like driving through milk. Buildings leaned in on either side, brick facades warped and crumbling. I recognized nothing. And then, the bridge. Chicago has hundreds of them, steel skeletons spanning the river. This one looked ancient, rusted, cables groaning in the wind. I had no choice but to cross. As I rolled onto it, the truck shuddered. The weight of it echoed through the steel like a scream. In the middle of the bridge, my headlights caught movement. A group of figures stood across the span. Men in fedoras, women in gowns, children clutching old toys. All from different decades, different times. Their faces were pale, hollow, eyes black pits. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking the way. I laid on the horn. The sound roared across the bridge. They didn't flinch. My pulse thundered. I dropped gears, braced myself, and eased the truck forward. I wasn't about to stop, but as I neared them, the figures shifted, not stepping aside, not moving like people, but melting. Their shapes bled into the snow, into the steel, into the air itself, until there was nothing. I crossed the bridge trembling, breath fogging the cab. On the far side, I thought I was free. Streets opened wider, signs I recognized appeared. But the city wasn't done. The whispers began. Soft at first, like a radio, 2 stations at once. Then louder, clearer, all around me. Dozens of voices, hundreds, maybe thousands. They spoke in unison, rising and falling like a chant. You don't belong here. You don't belong here. You don't belong here. I slammed the wheel, trying to find an escape, but every turn twisted back into another dark street. The city was folding in on itself, trapping me. And then I saw the building. An old meatpacking warehouse, brick walls blackened with soot. Every window glowed with faint orange light. I don't know why, but something pulled me toward it. I slowed as I passed, headlights sweeping across the facade. For just a moment, I saw them. Faces pressed to every window. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Men, women, children, watching. Mouths moving in silence. Then the lights went out. The truck stalled. Panic surged. I twisted the key, pumped the pedal. Nothing. The cab grew cold. Frost crept along the windshield. My breath came out in sharp gasps. And then, the passenger seat sank, like someone invisible had just sat down beside me. The air grew heavy, thick, as if the cab itself was underwater. A voice whispered inches from my ear, "You should have stayed on the highway." I bolted upright, twisting to see. Nothing. Empty seat. But when I turned back, the windshield was covered in handprints, small, large, overlapping, pressed into the glass from the outside, hundreds of them, smearing the frost. I screamed and slammed the key. The engine roared to life. The truck lurched forward, tires spitting snow. I didn't care where I was going, I just drove. Street after street blurred past, until finally, mercifully, I saw the interstate signs. I merged back onto the highway, city lights fading behind me. The whispers quieted. The cab warmed. By the time I hit the outskirts, the storm had eased. Cars appeared again. Normal life, like nothing had happened. But when I stopped at a rest area an hour later, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the passenger seat, clear as day, was a small, old-fashioned fedora, wet with melting snow. I never reported it, never told dispatch why I refused to run through Chicago at night again. But I'll tell you this, if you're ever driving through that city when the snow falls heavy and the streets go quiet, don't stop. Don't take the side roads. And whatever you do, don't look too closely at who's standing on the corners, because Chicago isn't empty, not at night. It's full of the ones who never left. Midnight haul through New York, a truck driver's haunted journey. Before we dive into tonight's chilling tale, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us keep bringing you terrifying stories every single week. And comment below telling us where you're watching from. You might just find someone listening at the exact same time as you, feeling the exact same chill. My name's Anthony, and I've been driving trucks up and down the East Coast for almost 20 years. I've hauled freight through quiet fishing towns, across mountain passes in the dead of winter, and through cities that never sleep. But the run that took me through New York one January night still lingers in my bones like frostbite. I've never been able to shake it, never been able to forget what I saw or what followed me out. Truckers will tell you New York is a beast all its own. The traffic doesn't stop. The horns, the lights, the river of people pouring through the streets. But the night I came through, it was different. Too quiet. And I know that sounds impossible for a city like New York, but I swear to you, that's exactly what made it so terrifying. It was a Wednesday, just past midnight. I had a run of office supplies bound for Pennsylvania, cutting through the city on the FDR before swinging out west. A snowstorm had rolled in fast, swallowing Manhattan in white. The kind of storm that makes even the most stubborn New Yorkers hide indoors. The bridges were near empty. That alone put me on edge. I've driven through at 3 a.m. and still seen bumper-to-bumper traffic. But that night, as I came across the Whitestone Bridge, all I saw was snow, swirling, endless, erasing the city. And then, as my headlights swept across the frozen river, I saw them. Figures on the ice. At first I thought I was seeing things, dark shapes standing on the frozen surface of the East River, motionless, watching. My eyes flicked from the road to the water and back again, heart thudding. They were too far to see clearly, but I counted at least a dozen. By the time I reached the other side, they were gone. Or maybe the snow just swallowed them. I gripped the wheel tighter. New York plays tricks on you, especially at night, especially in the storm. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew this was different. The GPS guided me downtown. Streets I knew well enough. I'd been through Manhattan dozens of times, but something felt off. The signs, the turns, they didn't look right, like the city was rearranging itself while I drove. At Houston Street, the cab filled with static. I checked the CB. Dead. My phone? No signal. That's when I heard it. A voice, not from the radio, not from outside, from inside the cab. Soft, whispering, right behind me. I twisted in my seat, heart hammering, but the cab was empty, just me and the hum of the engine. Then I caught it again, this time clearer. You're late. I damn near swerved into a snowbank. The rest of the drive downtown was a blur of panic. The storm thickened, and the streets seemed emptier than ever. New York has millions of people. Even in a blizzard, you'd expect to see a taxi, a plow, someone. But there was nothing. Until I hit the financial district, that's where I saw the man. He was standing at the corner of Wall Street under a broken streetlight, dressed in an old coat, the kind you'd see in black and white photos. His hat was pulled low, his hands tucked in his pockets. As I slowed, his head lifted, and even through the storm I could see his face. It wasn't right. Skin gray, lips cracked, eyes black and bottomless. He smiled, wide, too wide, and pointed at my cab as I rolled past. I floored it, tires spitting snow, but in the next block, there he was again. Same man, same coat, same grin, waiting. That's when I knew the city wasn't empty. It was full of them. Every block I passed, they appeared. Men in old coats, women in dresses soaked with snow, children clutching broken toys. Some wore rags, some wore suits, some wore clothes decades out of date. But their faces were all the same, pale, hollow, smiling, and every one of them turned to watch me. I don't remember how long I drove like that. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The streets twisted, doubled back, turned me around. The storm howled, the whispers grew louder. At one point I passed an alley and saw hundreds of them packed shoulder to shoulder, faces tilted toward the sky, mouths moving silently, like a congregation waiting for a sermon. I pushed on, desperate for the highway, for an exit, for anything that looked real. Then the tunnel appeared. The battery tunnel, yawning wide, its lights flickering. My GPS lit up again, arrow pointing straight through. I didn't think, I just went. Inside, the sound changed. The howl of the storm cut off, replaced by something worse. Whispers. Every inch of the tunnel walls, handprints smeared in frost. Hundreds of them. As I drove deeper, the lights overhead blinked out. One by one. Darkness swallowed the cab. And then, the passenger seat sank. Like someone invisible had climbed in beside me. The air grew heavy, freezing. My breath came out in clouds. My fingers locked on the wheel. Then a face leaned close. Pale, eyeless, mouth opening wide. "You'll never leave." The whisper wasn't sound. It was inside me, crawling through my skull. I screamed, stomped the pedal. The engine roared, the truck surged forward. For a moment I thought I was blind, the tunnel pitch black. And then, light. I burst out the other side, tires screeching, snow blinding me again. The city looked normal. Cars on the streets, lights in the buildings, horns in the distance, like I'd slipped back into the world I knew, but I didn't stop, didn't look back. I drove until New Jersey, until the snow eased and the whispers faded. At a rest stop off the turnpike, I finally pulled over. My hands shook so bad I could barely kill the engine. For a long time I just sat there, heart pounding, telling myself I'd imagined it all, until I saw the windshield, handprints, dozens of them, pressed into the glass from the inside. I don't take runs through New York at night anymore. Maybe I never will again. Because whatever's out there, whatever owns those streets when the snow falls heavy, it isn't done with me. And it won't be done with you either, if you're ever foolish enough to drive through the city that never sleeps when it finally does.